who are those children? We cannot sit here and pretend that these two children are Archie. There is no way on earth. This is not even up for debate. And yet, Archie and Lily are included in the line of succession. The moment that King Charles dies, they move up. That means that Harry, along with his two phantom children, will be in the top 6 senior positions. The toddlers don't just look different. They appear to be entirely unrelated children. Both images were taken from Meghan's videos. I go back to King Charles when he addressed the Congress and he mentioned checks and balances. Where are the checks and balances for this grift?
Prince Harry sat in the dimmed light of his private study, staring at a single piece of heavy vellum stationery that had arrived by hand from a London solicitor. It wasn't the contents of the letter that made his hands shake, but the realization that the man he had spent a decade ignoring was no longer a ghost in the background of his wife's history, but the primary architect of their potential collapse. 4 years Trevor Engelson had been the invisible man of the royal drama, a silent figure who existed only in the margins of unauthorized biographies, and the occasional grainy tabloid photo from a beach in Jamaica. But the world of 2026 had become a different place, and the era of silence had officially expired. The narrative of the star-crossed lovers who fled a cold monarchy to find freedom in the California sun was being dismantled piece by piece, not by a palace official or a disgruntled staffer, but by a man who possessed the one thing the Sussexes could not spin away: the archives of the beginning. While the world watched the slow-motion collision of Meghan's lifestyle brand launches, and the subsequent legal battles over palm tree logos and trademark disputes, a much more dangerous fire was smoldering in a high-rise office in Century City. Trevor Engelson wasn't looking for a payday. He had plenty of money, and a life that was objectively successful and full. What he was looking for was the restoration of a timeline that had been systematically rewritten, until his own existence had been reduced to a footnote. The true story of the Toronto years was not the one told in the glossy pages of a memoir, or the soft-focused lens of a Netflix documentary. It was a story of a calculated social migration where every friendship was a rung on a ladder, and every relationship had an expiration date tied to its utility. As the clock ticked toward midnight, Harry found himself wondering if the woman sleeping in the other wing of the house was the person he actually knew or the most successful character ever created by a Hollywood hopeful. The rumors of Trevor's manuscript had moved from being a whisper in the industry to a tangible threat that the Sussex legal team was powerless to stop, because there was no contract to breach and no non-disclosure agreement to enforce. Meghan had left her first marriage with the clinical efficiency of someone cleaning out a locker, but she had forgotten that the person on the other end of that FedEx package was a producer who understood exactly how to build a story. The irony of the situation was almost cinematic. The man who had been discarded was now the only person who could provide the context the world was suddenly starving for. People were beginning to notice the gaps in the Sussex story, the convenient lapses in memory, and the way the A-list circle that once surrounded them had quietly retreated into the shadows. Oprah was silent. The Clooneys were busy. The protective wall of celebrity influence had developed cracks that were now wide enough to see the isolation within. In the royal courts of London there was a different kind of silence. King Charles had navigated the spring of 2026 with a focus on his legacy and his health, leaving no room for the emotional turbulence of his younger son's California drama. When Harry had reached out for a meeting during the King's brief visit to the States, the door hadn't just been closed, it had been locked and deadbolt. The message was clear: the Crown was no longer interested in being the villain in someone else's script. This left the Sussexes alone on an island of their own, facing a man who remembered who they were before the titles and the cameras and the global platform. Trevor's version of the story didn't involve a girl who knew nothing of the royals or a serendipitous blind date. It involved a woman who studied the world she wanted to inhabit with the precision of a diamond cutter. It involved emails that discussed strategy and photographs that showed a different kind of ambition. As the rumors of the memoir's contents leaked into the ether, the public's fascination shifted from the couple's grievances to their origins. The skepticism that had once been the domain of the critics was now becoming the default setting for the general public. They were tired of the brand pivots and the constant claims of sabotage. They wanted to know why a man who had everything to lose by speaking had finally decided that the truth was worth the chaos. In the quiet of his study, Harry realized that the shock wasn't coming from the outside world, but from the internal realization that he might have been the last person to know the truth about his own life. The archives of Trevor Engelson were not just a collection of memories, they were a map of a journey that ended in a palace but started in a very different place. The psychological weight of that realization was staggering. Every time a new headline appeared regarding the trademark rejections or the logo similarities, Meghan would frame it as a coordinated attack from the institution they left behind. But the logic was failing. The public was starting to see that the institution wasn't attacking them, they were simply ignoring them. The real threat was coming from the past, a past that couldn't be controlled or litigated into submission. Trevor Engelson was the ghost that had finally found his voice, and he was speaking to a world that was ready to listen. The tragedy of the Sussexes in 2026 was not a lack of money or a lack of fame, it was a lack of believability. When your entire brand is built on your truth, the moment that truth is challenged by someone who lived it with you, the foundation becomes sand. Harry looked out the window at the Pacific Ocean, and for the first time in a long time he felt the coldness of the water. The script had been flipped. The producer was now the lead and the stars were waiting in the wings for a finale they didn't write. The manuscript sitting in a vault in Los Angeles wasn't just a book, it was a mirror, and when the world finally looked into it, the reflection would change everything forever. The era of the Sussex narrative was ending and the era of the Trevor testimony was beginning, and in the high-stakes game of Hollywood and royalty, there are no second takes when the truth finally walks onto the set.